one for the bishop, one for the rest of the clergy, and a third for the reparation or lighting of the church. The relations of the clergy, and especially of the bishops, to the emperor and other high officials present curious contrasts. The respect paid to the bishop was from the first very great, and it was certainly not diminished when he became a conspicuous person in the eyes of the world. Even emperors bowed the head before him and kissed his hand. Jerome, whose life was simple and ascetic, was indignant at the lofty bearing of some of the prelates and presbyters, and begged them to remember that the faithful were their fellow servants, not their bond servants. But whatever respect the emperors might pay to the Church and its officers, they had in fact immense influence over it. From the time when the emperors became Christian, says Socrates, the affairs of the Church depended upon them. It could hardly be otherwise. Privileges were conferred by law upon the Catholic Church alone, and occasions unfortunately soon arose when it was necessary for the emperor to say which of two contending parties he considered Catholic. If the defeated party asked what the emperor had to do with the Church, the victors replied that the Church was in the state, and that none was over the emperor but God. The Fathers at Constantinople in the year 448, when an imperial rescript had been read, cried out, "Long live our high priest the emperor!" Edicts issued by the emperor were published in the churches. And as the emperor, by influence or direct nomination, secured the election of many bishops, especially those of Constantinople, the episcopal order was generally disposed to do him homage. Justinian showed much favour to the Church, but at the same time he made it more directly subject to the state. Whomsoever he may have consulted privately, his edicts on the affairs of the Church, even on a matter so strictly ecclesiastical as the tone in which the liturgy should be said, run in precisely the same style as those on purely secular matters. No authority but that of the emperor appears in them. He issues his commands to the patriarchs of old Rome and of Constantinople as if they were imperial officials. The Italian bishops, however, always maintained a certain independence, and noted with some degree of contempt the subservience of their Eastern brethren. And generally, in spite of the temptation to compliance, there were never wanting ecclesiastical leaders courageous enough to enforce, even upon emperors and their favourites, the claims of the Church to a higher sovereignty than that of temporal princes. Chrysostom could brave imperial anger and go calmly into exile. Ambrose could repel Theodosius, bloody with massacre, from his Church. Nor were these solitary instances. It was perhaps an almost inevitable result of the intimate connexion between the Church and the Empire that dissidents from the faith recognized as Catholic were persecuted. The greatest leaders of Christian thought were indeed opposed to all coercion in matters of faith. Hilary of Poitiers, for instance, set forth the blessings of religious freedom and the worthlessness of enforced compliance with admirable clearness and force. Chrysostom would limit persecution to forbidding the assemblies of heretics and depriving them of their churches. The great name of Augustine, however, appears among the advocates of persecution. He had indeed in his earlier days contended for the freedom of religious convictions, but the obstinate resistance of the Donatists to his earnest persuasions convinced him that there were some who would own no argument but force. Theodosius I enacted severe laws against those who did not accept the Catholic faith, but these were not executed. And the first Christian prince who actually caused men to be put to death on account of religion was the usurper Maximus, whose proceedings called forth general indignation and found no imitator for many generations. The excellent Martin of Tours protested in this case that it was an outrage for a secular judge to try an ecclesiastical case, and that no other punishment could fittingly be inflicted on heretics but that of excommunication. Chapter 10.